This week on Talk to Me with Eugene Williams Jr., we have a very, very special show, a very, very special guest. I've known this particular guest her entire life. I first met her in August of 1998, and ever since then we've had a profound effect on each other's lives. She is a graduate of Orange County High School in Orange County, Virginia. She received her bachelor's degree in communications at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, and she's received her master's degree in journalism from Georgetown University. Currently, she's an entrepreneur who owns her own company called Paige's Pottery and Painting, and she teaches pottery at 2 studios in the DMV area, the Hinkley Pottery Studio and our House 7. As always, we're going to give our guest a Don Cornelius Soul Train welcome. Let's put our hands and give it all up for my daughter, Paige Williams. Thank you so much for being a guest on Talk to Me with Eugene Williams Jr. I've been waiting a long time for this now. You know, originally, the idea was for us to have a podcast together.
Yes.
But you said that's not where you were at this particular time. You wanted to kind of do some other things. So, as always, as a father of a young adult, I have to be understanding and listen and know my place. So we'll work on that some other time in the future.
Correct.
But I just wanted to tell you that I'm so glad you're here because I tell my audience all the time that I have lived a Forrest Gumpian lifestyle in that there have been times when I've had a fantastic and profound effect on people, and then there's a whole bunch of other people who've had a profound effect on me. I feel like you are the personification of that because I know I've had an effect on you because I'm your dad.
Right.
But I think you have had a tremendous effect on me in terms of my growth as a human being, my growth as a man. And so I wanted to spend some time with you, let them know who you are, let them know about our relationship, and just kind of have a daddy-daughter moment, if you will. Is that okay with you?
I think that's fine. I think that's why I agreed to do this, and I thought, what are the best times of Father's Day supposed to be nice.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we're letting everybody know this is a Father's Day show.
Father's Day.
Now, I don't know what time it's going to drop in terms of
Right.
on the internet, but know that we're talking on Father's Day 2025. So
Yes.
it's very, very special for me to have you here. Okay, so Paige, let me ask you this. You are a young lady who was the daughter of 2 career educators. So basically the whole idea of going to school, succeeding in school, and going to college and succeeding in college really was not an option for you. I would say to say that that's what we expected out of you. And eventually that's what you expected out of yourself. But you have a degree in communications. You have a degree in journalism. But you've made a pivot, at least for now. How do we get from communications and journalism to becoming an instructor in art and pottery in the DC area at 2 different studios? How do we get from there to here?
Yes. Well, I think every now and then that kind of comes up in my mind in general too. Kind of like, how did I kind of pivot from this to that? But in general, like when I started with wanting to go like way back in the career, going into like communications and media, my main focus was when I would get in there was to talk about arts and culture. And specifically arts and culture, because I felt like you really didn't hear most of that growing up, especially if you were in a rural area.
Sure.
So I was like, I'm not in the city, and I really don't have the opportunity to hear about that or even experience it as much. So I want to actually kind of talk about it, or even go to rural communities and talk about the arts and culture, or the hidden arts and culture life that they have there.
Sure.
Because there's many of them that I've now discovered through other people in the community that I've, been able to be a part of, has told me about it. And so that's kind of what I went into when it came to school. Because as you remember, I applied to, I think it was Pratt, the Art Institute.
You did.
And I
You
didn't
did.
get in.
You did.
But that was kind of like my first school that I wanted to get to, was an art school. And so once that kind of happened, I was like, all right, let me just, get quote unquote serious and go into communications and media because I thought it was safe. But, after going through schooling and then grad school, which I thought, I was kind of happy I went through grad school, even though it was during COVID, which it was a little harder to report on stories I wanted to do. And you guys had just moved into like a county that I had never even heard of before. So that kind of changed the whole way of it. But I still had that mindset of I do want to report on arts and culture. And then when I moved to DC, I knew I was like, okay, I'm going to be around people who have been all around the world and, have a different point of view of things. And I did that, I had that. But I did notice, of course, as DC being DC, it's more political based. And I felt like a lot of stories were kind of going that way. And I was like, this is not kind of what I came in for.
Okay.
So that's when I decided to kind of change that route. Now, with that being said, I love the aspect of being behind the camera and doing the editing and making sure the software and how the scenes look were amazing. I loved adding my arts into that as well because originally, you remember when I went into it, I wanted to actually be in front of the camera. I wanted to be in front of the camera.
If I'm not mistaken, I think when you originally went into it, you wanted to be that person at the anchor desk, reporting the stories.
Exactly.
But you also had this desire to, as you got older, to edit the stories and produce and do news copy and all of that. So gosh, I remember.
And that's kind of what happened because after I had done, there was the second I did during grad school where I was in front of the camera and they had all the students go in front of the camera and report on stories. And then I kind of realized, I was like, I really actually would rather be behind the scenes. I'd rather be the one helping produce the story and kind of add that, art piece to it. Because I loved interviewing people, like doing street interviews, doing one-on-one interviews, and I realized I was like, I don't want to be the center of attention. I want to be like behind the scenes and make sure whoever it is or whatever subject I'm trying to portray on the TV, I want it to be that person or that topic. So I was kind of glad that I was able to kind of fade into the background, which I really love because that's when the story really comes out.
But hold on now, you're telling me about the journalism idea and fading into the background, but take me to how it changed into pottery.
Yes.
Because from being a network anchor to a great potter is a whole other realm. So how do you get there?
Right. Well, as I said, I was in DC.
Yeah. And
at the time there was nothing but like internships that were being offered, but everybody knows like DC is not the cheapest place to be around. And so more and more during that time, I started like creating art in my apartment while I was in school. So I was creating art, and I had already been a student in a ceramics class. And so I just kept creating, and I accumulated so many things that I was just like, why don't I just like try and sell it or promote it or some type of way?
Yes.
And when people actually were interested in it, and I started having like going to local artists and friends of mine who had markets, and people were like, oh yeah, I do your art, or it was such a great moment when I did market the year after, and I had returning people who were like, I still have your work. And I was like, okay, this is actually making an impact here, and I love every minute of creating art. And so I was like, why don't I just at the time, I was like, why don't I try to be like an art teacher? And I did that, and then I kind of pivoted to ceramics, which is, this is my pot
this is a piece, y'all. This is a piece that she created right here. So
right here.
We're gonna do some little shameless plug advertising.
Right.
Pottery.
I had to add that in. But after I was able to kind of see that, okay, I can actually make a life doing this.
Sure.
And it's not because I think growing up, I will say this, my parents never discouraged me from creating art. Never. There was never a time where they were just like, Paige, put down the brush and let's get back to the books.
Let me interject here.
I didn't see that.
I would say that Mrs. Williams and I never discouraged you. But I remember a time, and I share this with you all because Paige knows I teach about this all the time.
Right.
One of the first pieces of art that I remember you bringing home was something you made in shop class. It was a wooden fish.
Yes, it was.
I don't know what kind of fish it was, because I really couldn't tell.
First of all,
Let me finish the story. It was a wooden fish of some sort, of some species, that was painted right in the middle of the flag. I don't know where that type of patriotism came from, but that's your gig, it's your thing. God bless you, God bless America. But, and he put some hooks in it, and it was supposed to be
it was a key holder.
a key holder.
Key holder, yes.
And I'm going to tell America, because I told my daughter this, it was the ugliest thing I've ever seen. And I did not, we keep it 100 in our family.
We do.
And I did not foresee the art career that you would have,
right?
at that particular point in your artistic development.
But you know what it was though? This is what it was. See, that fish caused so much controversy in the family because I wanted that fish to be put up. I wanted, because there was this constant thing happening.
I wasn't putting that ugly fish up on my wall. I was not going to do that.
People were losing keys. People couldn't find keys, and it was the running joke of like, if we put the fish up, people could have it. But one thing I will say to myself is like, even though my art, there was moments where I had my art, and I was like, maybe this isn't the best thing, but I was always promoting myself and like, okay, this is something, and I'm gonna make someone else know this is something.
Well, the reason, when I knew that you had talent, true talent, first of all, because I can tell you, as a person who's observed you over the years, your pottery has every single month, week, year, it's better and better and better and better. You top yourself every single time, and I love that about what you're doing. But I didn't know that you were going to be successful at this career until it was the very first outdoor market you did, I think. Mm-hmm. I believe we were in Prince George's County, Maryland, outdoors.
Yeah.
And you had all your earliest pieces,
Yes,
which looked nothing like this, which was not nearly as beautiful and refined and as put together as this and your current pieces. And I believe it was the mayor or the county councilman of Prince George's County came up to you.
It was somebody who was part of something.
And he saw one of your pieces and said, I want that for my house. And I said to myself, she's really an artist. Like, people really appreciate what she's doing. I can't see it now, but someone else sees the vision. So if other people see the vision, then it must be a vision to see.
Well, when I first started showing my art, I was kind of shocked when people were interested in it too, because I was just like, I'm definitely still like beginning. I'm still trying to, I had so much that I was like, I wanted to at least like see what would happen.
But anybody that's seen your art now would not view you as a beginner. I mean, there's nothing. There's nothing that you think that because you always have been a humble person. But there's nothing that's a beginner about the art that you do because you receive acclaim from all over for the things that you do. You've been to many fairs, many different functions, and sold your stuff. So.
But I would say like like I said, it's still a growing thing. I'm still learning from like other ceramics teachers who've been teaching for years. Because as I said, I'm always like a beginner teacher. Like, I'm the one who just wants you to get on the wheel and kind of just know that this is an art, so don't take too much pressure with you. But also, it's going to take time and patience. And I think the reason why that I chose specifically ceramics is because, like I said, it relates a lot to life, right?
Sure.
Like, I think we always want, especially nowadays, like this instant gratification of, like, oh, I see somebody else do it, let me do it. But what I learned, because I learned ceramics when I was an undergrad, what I learned was that in order for you to create a piece that you're proud of, or even to have like significance in someone else, you really have to take time with it. And the best pieces don't just come from doing it for 1 second.
Sure.
And that goes to life, right? Like, a lot of people view like success in many different ways. And it takes time to do it. Nothing comes that easy. And that's why I love the process of ceramics, because it's a long process. Like, first you have to get the clay, then you have to wedge it. Then you have to make sure you have all your tools together. You make a couple pieces. You might toss them out because they might not be up to par. It has to go through 2 firings. You have to, so it's such a thought process between it versus like, and I love painting too. When I painted, it was kind of like you sit there and you paint. and you think about it. But I think with my pieces now, because I used to just like make cups and bowls, but now I'm sitting down and I'm starting to actually paint on my ceramic pieces.
Yes.
So it's even more of a, like, okay, I really have to think and sit down through it. And as I said, it relates to life. Like, you can't really rush. Like, the best things aren't rushed.
No.
And you're going to inevitably have some failures.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to have a couple pots and you might have to smash or, just smush. And you're going to have to, you might have a day where you're making a bunch and nothing turns out.
Right.
But you can't let that 1, 2, or 3 days discourage you, because you're going to have that day when you make a great piece that you actually are proud of. So that's the reason why I specifically was, I gravitated towards ceramics, is because I said it had to do a lot with what I was going through in my life. Like, I felt like, I wasn't, like, I just, got out of college, and I wasn't doing what I initially thought I would do, which is life, and it's happening to a lot of people right now.
Yeah.
And it's,
I'm not doing what I was usually trained to do, so.
like,
Whether you're 26 or 56, it's whatever.
I was like, it's like, it essentially felt like I was starting over, even though like I am, younger, but it felt like I was starting over again from scratch. But I actually was doing it with people that were very supportive, and that's why I said, like, in service community, for me at least, like, everyone was very supportive and continuously is supportive of me doing this as a full-time career. And granted, like, I'm working, at different studios, spots, so it's not like a regular 9 to 5, right? Like, it's not like when you get home, each day is very different. But it's exciting. That's what I like about it.
Sure.
It's not like, there's not a strict schedule, but there is an expectation, and I love that.
Well, one of the things that I respect most about you, Paige, is the fact that you make decisions oftentimes based upon what you know is going to help you grow the most as a person at that particular time in your life. I thought it was very courageous of you to decide at that juncture, I'm going to leave what I was trained for, and I'm going to turn my life totally towards this art thing, at least for however long this lasts and what we're doing, and see where it takes me. And it's taking you to great places. I've always respected that about you, because you had way more courage at your age than I did. You went for what you thought you should go for. I went for what was the path of least resistance, some could argue. And I have no regrets about that, because doing that gave me your mother, and gave me you, and gave me the opportunity to affect young lives all over the country. But I just wanted to tell you, that while we're here together, that I have the utmost respect for you and that particular choice, because you found your talent, you're working your talent, you're exploiting your talent, and you're making it work for you at a very, very young age. And that's something that I think a lot of young people can learn from. But let's move forward. So, who were your earliest influences? Since you ended up being an artist, who were your earliest influences in terms of art? In terms of who inspired you? I want to make pieces like that person, or there's a particular art teacher or a particular artist you follow that made you decide what type of style you want to employ in your art.
I would say, if anything, it kind of started from the paintings that I first did, and usually, like, my whole thing was I always wanted to paint it from the perception of a Black woman, right? That was the whole perception that I was always kind of aiming for. Because
what other perception would you paint from? You are a Black woman.
Well, exactly. I'm saying, like, you have, like, artists, no matter what, culture or race, that'll kind of just maybe just do flowers, or
Right.
Maybe just nature scenes, or something like that.
Right.
But I was specifically, that's all I was painting was Black women. That's all I was painting.
It's true. I remember that when you first started.
Right.
Every single picture you had was a Black woman, different type, different shape,
Right.
different style,
And
body type. Yeah.
The reason why I was doing that is because, like, now, of course, we're seeing more of a diversity within art. But there was a brief moment, like in the early 2000s, you weren't really seeing that, especially where I was growing up. That wasn't something that you really saw that often. So I was just like, I wanted to create and make paintings that I would have wanted to see when I walk into a museum. And I think that's how I've always gone with it, because you go to all these, like, very high, places and museums, and people are like, oh, you have to go there because you do arts, you love this museum. I walk in, I'm like, I'm seeing the same colonial thing, which there's nothing wrong with that, but it was the whole same
stuff over
the same stuff over and over again, and you weren't seeing us in it at all.
Right.
Or if you saw us in it, we were like the person in the corner holding something, in the corner of the photo. I was just like, why is this a depiction, and why do people always keep telling me to go here? And it wasn't until I was, finally able to go to museums that were more modern,
Right.
and then I was able to actually see, Black people seen in a different light. And I have to give credit because when I was up in Connecticut, I went to certain museums there where it was the smaller ones that would show local artists and their work. And I was like, finally, this is what I wanted to see. And it was like, you couldn't, the only time you could actually see that is if you went to other artists who were local and they were actually hosting shows, or other artists who were in school and they were hosting their own shows. And when I went to their shows, I was like a relief. I was like, finally I'm seeing something that I can relate to. And I could see the emotion through that and understand where this artist, what they were interpreting. And some art, you might interpret a different way than what the artist was even trying to create. So it just invoked a lot of emotion for me that I finally was looking for versus going to the same places and seeing the same thing. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But it would just be nice for once to see that.
Let me ask you this though, because you did grow up in a predominantly white rural area, grades 1 through 12, in great part because that's where your mother and I worked as school administrators in those parts of Virginia. This is going to be a strange question, but not so strange. How did you, for lack of a better term, how did you hold on to your blackness in the midst of being in situations where a lot of times you were the only black person in the advanced placement class, the only black person in this class, or what have you? How did you? What was it about your experiences growing up that made you say, wait a minute, I really got to zero in on the African Americanness of me, on the femaleness of me, in terms of my painting side of my art?
Painting side. I think it was mostly just keeping that mindset of I will honestly say reading did a lot for me because you would read poems and
Pause. Parents, read to your kids. America, read to your kids. Continue.
But I would most definitely say reading did a lot for me during that time because there was classes that I was taking and it would talk about Harlem Renaissance. I mean that fascinated me the most too because it was a renewal of Black culture and they were trying to find it and it wasn't all in your face either. It was subtle and it was nice and it was refreshing. And even today, if you saw a painting and you saw that, you're like, oh, this could be modern, and it was made back then. And so I think that era really kind of had me it really took me on a hold with it because I loved seeing that, and also the realism, and it just basic murals that you would see. I think I loved that. But in general, I mean, you guys were. No strangers to telling me how it was. So I definitely the Marvin neighbor.
Okay, elaborate on that. When you say that, and be careful how you answer this question. But when you say your mother and I were no strangers with regards to telling you how it was, I'm interested in that. How did that, from your standpoint, how did that manifest itself? Me and your mama telling you how it was.
Well, I would say it was mostly just you guys wouldn't, if it wasn't around you, you would take me to places where it could be around you, right? You took the time out of your day to take day trips to DC, to take trips to New York, to sit down in professors' classes at the age of 13, to meet people, and to sit down and actually have conversation with them at a young age. And at the time, I mean, I was processing it, but at the time when you're 13, you're just like, oh, I just want to hang out and do stuff. And I remember you guys would say, like, even though right now it seems very boring and you don't want to do it, it's very important for you to know that there's a bigger world outside the area that you grew up in.
Yes.
And so now that I'm older, I think it did make a huge difference and a huge change. And it wasn't just Black culture either. It was many different cultures. Like, you guys were very big on just like showing like the importance of how other cultures even make an influence on what we see today too. So I'm saying it wasn't just solely that. It was just like interpreting that in a different way. And I think it really helped me in terms of
Well, you know, it's refreshing to hear you say that, because that was what we were going for, number one. Let us speak for you, mother, when I say that. But also, it was important for us because when your mother and I grew up, it was really hard to get a hold of positive African American images and hearing the wholeness of the African American experience in your school classes. I mean, I remember telling you a story about when I was in middle school. They taught the Civil War as the War of Northern Aggression, and I was like, the War of Northern Aggression?
Yeah.
I mean, but the South was pretty darn aggressive too. And so when African American history is framed in that way growing up, and then luckily I had a father, a late father, who was a professor at Howard University. I had a mother who was very much a social activist, God rest her soul. Because of their experience, they helped me kind of realize how things were, and a lot of those day trips and opportunities that we provided for you were influenced by our own parents, and my wife's parents is also very, very, very serious about letting you know that the contributions that African Americans have made to American history. So I got to shout out my parents and my in-laws who are influencing my wife and yours truly to put that in her head.
And I think, in general, I think that's why I kind of chose the path of art, though, too. It's a lot of, like, your expression is within your piece, so you don't have to say a word.
Right.
And I think that was the biggest thing, because I feel like all day, and, I think we're all, like, kind of things, we'll just sit here and watch, like, the videos over and over and over and over and over again. And you're so used to someone, yelling, shouting, screaming. But the thing I love about art is that you can just say your piece within your piece without having to say anything.
You can speak volumes just by a brushstroke. Yeah.
Like, exactly.
Yeah.
And I just love the silence of that. And I just love how it's just it's subtle, but it's also loud. And it kind of just shows you what you have to say without having to say anything.
That's how I would best describe you, loudly subtle. I would describe your own personality, your own way of doing things as loudly subtle. I will never forget, while we're still on this topic, and you recall this, one day, because I was the assistant principal at the high school where you attended, and one day you would come back from a history class, and you came to my office, and you said, Dad, today we were learning about the 50s. And the teacher told us that the 50s were the happy days, everything was great, and everybody was happy and wonderful, and things were going well in America during the 50s. They were the happy days, and you sheepishly raised your hand as the only black person in that class and said, excuse me, sir, they weren't happy for everybody. And it was at that point that I realized, okay, my wife and I, we've achieved our goal in terms of our parenting. As always, in the face of a lot of controversies, you always represented us with class and that subtle loudness that we appreciate. So, let me take you a little bit further now. We've talked about your career. We've talked about your influences. Where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? These are conversations we have off camera all the time. We have them throughout your life.
Yeah.
But where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? It could be 5, it could be 10. Not to get too specific, because we never know what life's going to bring us. But what do you hope would have happened in terms of your development and your life within those next 5, 10 years?
Well, I will say I love when people ask that question because I'm just like, I don't even read the dinner tonight. So to know what we're doing in 5 years, who really knows? But I will say, I will hope that I am continuing making art. I know inevitably I'm going to continue making